So, welcome to this month's Millennial Spotlight brought to you by Lead with Intention. I'm Leslie Bosserman, Executive Coach and Lifestyle Strategist, partnering with millennial leaders and their managers. So, the purpose of these conversations we have each month is to really feature a millennial changemaker to deepen and extend the dialogue around how we lead with intention. So, this month we're focusing on the intention of self acceptance to really help millennials learn how to claim what is enough. So, what does that look like? How do we exist in the space of sufficiency versus efficiency, and how to overcome a sense of perfectionism? So today I'm really honored to be here with fellow entrepreneur and reformed overachiever, Dana Nguyen. So welcome, Dana. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me.
It's such a pleasure. So I'd love for you to tell us a little bit briefly about your career path and any formative life events that have brought you to this space you're in now, just so we get a sense of who you are.
Sure. I'm kind of a stereotypical Silicon Valley story, really, to begin with. I went to Stanford, studied engineering, then went to Google, where I was in marketing for 5 years, and then being surrounded by the Silicon Valley energy, decided that I wanted to strike out and try a startup of my own after Google. And then that's when things kind of started to change a bit. My business partner was also my romantic partner, and that first business venture just didn't quite work out for either of us, the relationship or the business. And that was probably the biggest turning point and traumatic event that caused me to reevaluate what my values and priorities were and what exactly I wanted to be doing. And I think that prior to that, there's been kind of a path. There was a Silicon Valley path, or a very conventional way of thinking that I thought was unconventional, but turned out to be quite normal in the terms of a path of a career. And so it really caused me to question everything and do a lot of inward soul searching about myself and my values and my passions and what I wanted to do, and led me to where I am today. So I moved away from Silicon Valley and have been pursuing a new business idea that I think captures a lot more of my values, but isn't necessarily primed for the kind of success that I maybe had would have expected 5 or 10 years ago out of myself. But that kind of moment was definitely something that I think was so necessary, and that failure really is a matter of perspective. And I look at that moment and think of how grateful I am for the questions that it raised in me, and I think really has helped me forge a stronger identity in what it is that I want, not only out of my life and my career, but just, what kind of purpose I want to have in the world.
Wow, that segment of your story, just a piece of that, it really models how we can choose self-acceptance when we see either failure or opportunity. We have so much choice in how we perceive things. And I love how you're taking it not as, oh, my life is over because this pathway that I was banking on is gone, but it's now your chance to really forge your own path and to think about what does that look like and how do you define the rules around that. So there's such a deep, not only self-acceptance, but self-awareness. And I'm excited to learn a little more about kind of your vision ahead and the values that are driving you. So if you could maybe highlight one or two of these values you're talking about that really define where you are now and what your purpose is, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I faced early on as an overachiever, whenever you're given some kind of obstacle, the mindset is, I can beat it. I can overcome this. And this is really, I think, something from a young age. Nobody told me. It's just kind of the way that I was. And I didn't really differentiate the difference between challenge and struggle. And struggle is really when you're kind of fighting fruitlessly. This is not a great battle. You're just slogging through it. Challenge is something where there's something on the other side. You have the tools to overcome this, and it's an exciting type of opportunity as opposed to just something that feels fruitless. Now, how that's kind of affected me now is I look at a lot of things in my life and where I just saw a struggle and I thought, you know what, I'm just going to achieve my way through this. Like, I'm smart. I got the, perseverance. I'm stubborn enough. I can make this work. And not recognizing that maybe that block there, that wall, is there for a reason. Maybe it's there because there's something bad on the other side and you should just find another way around. And I find this coming up in small ways when so I'm currently kind of coding an app, and occasionally I'll get into layers and layers and layers of complexity, and I'll realize, this is one of those times where it's not the problem that's complex, it's that I'm approaching it from the wrong direction. So I need to take a step back and simplify and find another way around, because if I'm needing to take all of these levels of complexity, the problem isn't the problem is me. So let me take myself out and try and reevaluate where I am. And that's, in a small task like a coding problem that I'm finding, but also in my life when I recognize something that's happening and I'm really struggling through it, and I'm like, I think that this is me. This is me struggling, and let me take a step back and find another way around this wall that's not just brute forcing my way over it.
So, one thing that you mention here that I highlight a lot with clients, and I've actually used this metaphor in a number of occasions. It came to me when I was in a similar place, when I was just like, I just got to get through this. I just got to push forward or carry on or break down the wall. And it's almost like we're standing in front of a brick wall with our fists up, just punching it. And we realize our knuckles are bleeding. We can't get through. And then we just take a break and we realize the wall's only 5 feet wide and 10 feet tall. So it's like you can step to your right or your left and go right past it without having to beat down this wall. But it's that sense of pause and perspective and acceptance that sometimes we are in our own way, just like you're saying, that we are the issue. So while we can be our best advocate, we're also our worst enemy at times. So I resonate a lot with kind of that sense of getting out of our own way. So through my work as a coach and a lifestyle strategist, I've really noticed a lot of millennials struggling with the same sense of just got to push through it. Like, if I can do enough and be enough and have enough, I am enough. So in your life, really tell me more about how do you determine what enough looks like, what it feels like, and what are you noticing your peers and your friends doing as well?
Yeah, I remember reading Amy Poehler's book, The Yes Please, and there's a lot of great books out there, but there was one thing she said in there that really resonated with me, which was good for her, not for me. And I think it's a mantra that I've really stuck onto, because I think that we as humans are so relational and comparative that we don't necessarily look at what it is that we need or that we want, but instead we compare ourselves to other people and what they're doing and what they want without taking in the context of who they are, what experiences have led them to this, what their values are, and everything. And I think that has been something that's been a challenge for me, is that stop comparing myself, stop trying to follow a path that was set by other people, stop, thinking about what it is that they're perceiving of me, and really trying to look inside me as much as possible about what is it that what brings me joy? What is it that brings me a sense of purpose? And what is it that I that fills me with, excitement? And I think those are the things that are very basic questions that you have to ask yourself deeply. It's a lot of whys, and not just, well, because I'm passionate about it, but why? What is it about that you're passionate about? And for me, the pivot from my first company to my second idea really had to do with a lot of that questioning of, I'm kind of in the same space, but I realized that I was following what I thought would make a lot of money. I was following an idea that other people really liked. And it wasn't necessarily the impact that I wanted to have on the world, but it was a great story that I could tell people, and a lot of people resonated with it. But if it didn't resonate with me, then what was the point? And I think that is maybe the kind of my particular way of how do I figure out what's enough is it's asking myself and feeling it inside of, does this really feel right? Does this feel good? Is this what I want to be doing? Because we all know those answers. And I think when you asked about, how do I see my peers or other millennials dealing with this, people will come to me and ask advice. And most of the time, I feel my advice is not telling them anything specifically, but trying to have them ask themselves more what they want. Because really, when you're asking people for an opinion, you're looking for validation for something. And I try not to give that validation because I don't want them to be doing something out of somebody else's opinion, but out of a sense of certainty and out of a sense of purpose that this is truly what drives them, what motivates them, what excites them, what brings them joy. For some people, I found that when they're honest with themselves, they realize that, having a career that pays well is necessary because if they don't have that, they're not going to feel secure, they're not going to feel safe, and that's going to lead to anxiety. And so I think it was important for them to talk to me and kind of realize that is something that's important to them and that their quality of life will be drastically affected if they don't have that. And I think that understanding what are those absolute necessities that you need so that you can live your best life. And in the startup world, we always talk about minimum viable products. Strip down everything to the point where you get to just the base functionality, where if you remove one thing, the whole thing breaks. And I like to kind of apply that to my life, the minimum viable product of my life. What is it the bare minimum, if I strip this away, I will no longer function. I will no longer really be a great person. And how do I get to that? And what are those things? And I think that's kind of the way that I try and live and how I find what's enough and recognizing, I'm choosing to do this because this is how it affects me. And I feel good doing this. Yeah.
That is so foundational. Like what you just described is pretty identical to the process that I walk coaching clients through when they're feeling a little lost or needing, like you say, validation or needing something to help them move forward. So it's that sense of, well, what do you stand for? What do you want to stand for? And what does that produce in your life? So often we go to the why. You mentioned these deep why questions. And I find that so many people try to self diagnose and they get stuck in the why. And you can really break open the future when you say, well, what is next? And I love, Wayne Mueller has a book called A Life of Being, Having, and Doing Enough. And in it, he asks, what is the next best thing for your life? So oftentimes we get so focused on like so far in the future that we can't even take one half step forward. So in this perspective, he really champions people to really think about, where are you now? Not just what's next, but where are you now and where is that going to lead you? So when you see your other friends or peers struggling with things, what advice or what other insight would you give them to help them either embrace like this sense of it's okay to not have it all, be this quote unquote perfectionist? Is there anything else that you would add to what you've already shared, which is so deep?
Yeah, I think one of the things that is championed in society that I think is still a valuable perspective, however, it's not my perspective, is this idea of really delaying joy. That, when you put in enough work, later on you're going to be able to cash out on that. And I don't think that's a bad attitude, but it's not mine. And so usually when I talk to people, I try and focus on, the joy of the moment. And sometimes it's about finding the joy in your moments when you don't have a choice. But there's always a choice of somehow to find that joy and to find how to make it whatever you're doing better. So in some cases, if the work is killing them, it's like, you have to recognize at the end of the day, is this your identity? Is this how you want to be living your life? I used to live in San Francisco and I had a very real fear I feel like there was a non-trivial chance that I could get hit by a car, at any moment because there were tons of pedestrian deaths. And I remember having that moment once when I was walking through the city and thinking about that proverbial life flashing before your eyes. And is this the life that you would want to have flash before your eyes? And I
Mm.
recognize that to me, I never wanted to live my life with a regret that I didn't do something, or that there was a regret that how I treated somebody, or what I was spending my time in doing. And that was how I wanted to live. And so oftentimes when I talk to people, that's the type of mentality that I want to encourage in them is what is it, you know, what is it that you would regret? What is there something, if tomorrow was your last day, what would you change in your thinking? And I think that same idea of where I was, fortunate in some ways to have such a traumatic activity or event happen that it caused me to question everything, that oftentimes you don't have that. A lot of people don't have that opportunity. And so when you are faced with, death or something, I think that's a time when you question everything. So to try and call that in earlier, I think really highlights those deep values inside you that may have been covered by layers of expectations and plans and other types of noise that really distract you from that.
That is so profound in such a huge way. Like when I think about this perspective of wholehearted leadership that I've really been cultivating and embracing, one of the foundational principles, and actually the final principle that I teach, is called create a daily legacy. So it's not just about what's your legacy going to be or what's on your tombstone. It's really about how are you living each day in a way to be the person you want to be, not just do what you need to do. So often we base our life and success on what we've accomplished from our to-do list. And I always champion people to think about, if you were to create a to-be list, to think about the qualities, the characteristics, the values, the person that you ultimately want to be. How are you doing that today? Not delaying it, not delaying joy, not delaying fulfillment in that sense, but how are you living that today? So as we wrap up, because I feel like we're in such a ripe place here, if you were to rewind kind of to the point where you were still working at Google and you were considering really what you wanted your life to be, if someone had come to you, whether a mentor or a colleague or even a fairy godmother, and they would have shared something transformational with you, what do you wish you would have known in that moment?
It's I'm going to be a little controversial here because in some ways I feel that it took all of the struggles and challenges and failures to get to where I am today, that putting in that work and putting in those mistakes was necessary. So to have a fairy godmother come and
Yeah, you don't need to be rescued. So I
yeah.
don't look at this as like, oh, don't change your past. So maybe if we ask, if you were to share something really pivotal with someone who might be in that place, who might be kind of trying to decide, is it worth it to kind of step out and follow my passion or really live for the sense of fulfillment rather than just putting in my time towards retirement? What would you champion them to do or think about? In addition to everything else you've shared, which is just golden.
Yeah, um, I think it would be that failure is a matter of perspective, and failing is the greatest success that you can have. I think that to me, embracing failure and chasing failure has been the best part of growing, and that I've really, in challenging myself and not being afraid to fail and accepting myself if I do, what I consider fail, miss these expectations that I set for myself. There is nothing wrong in that, and that in fact there's so much more to be gained um, in that. So like chase failure, find success in that failure, and just remember that failure is a matter of perspective.
I often think about, if this is the best, worst thing that's ever happened to me, what would be possible? So often we dwell in, this is the worst thing ever. we just want something to feel better or be better. But if really we could look at it from that sense of, is this the best, worst thing that has ever happened to me? And I think that level of self-acceptance isn't easy, but it's totally accessible. It's totally available to us. So thank you so much for being with us and just sharing so much of your story and so much insight. And I love these reflective questions you've left us with. So really looking at joy and passion and purpose, and not letting failure be this defining moment that ends your life, but really gives it a place of acceptance to reboot. So I just thank you so much, Dana. And I want to encourage everybody to check out leadwithintention.com. We have other millennial spotlights and opportunities for future change makers to also be featured if you're curious about that. We're also launching some great programs and services to support your continued discovery and growth, and to be really that light in the space of self-acceptance. So again, this is Leslie Bosserman. I'm inviting you to join this wholehearted leadership revolution as you continue to lead with intention.